Hi, everybody. This is Jake, and this is Politics by Jake. This is the Saturday show. Welcome. Well, we are in an awful situation, and for even more reasons than those that I will discuss on today's show. All I can say is stay tuned. And why do I say that? Well, I say that because situations like this, when they occur, is just like, it's actually just like the Epstein files, where all of a sudden you see all of the things that are going on and they can't be hidden anymore. It's like opening a drawer, if you'll pardon the unsavory allusion here, but unfortunately it's appropriate, so bear with me. It's just like opening a drawer, like, say, a utensils drawer, which contains things that you use to prepare and to eat your food and to put in your mouth, and then having the light shine in because you opened the drawer, and unless you opened it in the total darkness, which is unlikely, there's going to be sunlight, or there's going to be a light bulb that was on in the kitchen, and it's going to shine in, and that's going to happen instantly. And you discover, to your great dismay, suddenly 1,000 cockroaches who have been hidden there in the dark because they like the dark. And all of a sudden, they're shocked and they start scurrying around because now they're exposed. See, that's what shining light on something does. And I always default to Felix Frankfurter on this, the Supreme Court Justice. I don't think he said it first, but I believe he was repeating the words of an earlier justice who said sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I also say it's also really, really good for showing the actual truth of things that people are trying to hide. So that's the lead up to the show. So let's start the show, and let's start by playing a kind of a long clip. I guess I should say video or clip. Perhaps I should just say that it's a clip, it's a generic term, from one of my colleagues at Total Hypocrisy. And this is kind of a long clip, but it's kind of a good clip. And I'll make comments on it as I go. I won't tell you what it is. It speaks for itself when you hear it. It will speak for yourself, but I ask you to listen to it. As you know, I sometimes, occasionally, rarely play clips on this show, but there's so much going on, and there are so many good people in media, the alternative media, the digital media, because the corporate, corrupt, controlled media has long since failed in its mission, and are picking up some things after the fact, like the New York Times, for example. But please place this in its proper perspective because they have failed along with the other failed organs as well. So you need alternative voices. You need Politics by Jake. You need Total Hypocrisy, and you need the other ones as well. So this is packed with good information, and you need good information right now. We do upstream analysis and commentary here, but the information that you'll hear her speaking about is, I think, information you ought to have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and play the clip.
So the basic summary of this video is Americans are apathetic, they think they're untouchable, and we are in more danger than we ever thought possible. That being said, I intend to bring all of the receipts for this video, but it's gonna be long. So either grab a snack and hang in here or watch in 2x speed. I promise this is worth your time. First of all, let me show you what American privilege looks like. And this video clip I'm going to show is of someone who clearly is a Trump supporter, like the 25% who are still in the cult that would cheer for Trump no matter what he did. But there is a key phrase she uses at the end that just depicts what it is like to be around apathetic people in the United States who don't vote, who say things like politics isn't for me, who don't watch the news, who are not engaged. This is how they are thinking.
Woke up this morning expecting to just get on and do my Rise of the Resistance fast passes for Disney, and our president said, "Hold my Diet Coke." Me scrolling Twitter like, what did he do now? Major combat operations before my first iced latte. Like full-on Operation Epic Fury. You can't mess with good old Don Don. You can't. Donnie Boy, felonies, should have just signed the deal. I mean, he literally told Iranians to take over their government once America is done, playing fireworks. And then Iran goes after Israel. I just need to know that I'm going to be able to get to Disney.
She just wants to know if she's going to be able to get to Disney. That's all. That is a huge sentiment of so many people in this country. You have people that say politics is just not their thing. You have people that don't watch the news. You have people who say that political arguments are just drama, right? You have all of these people. Yes, you have the right and the left, and they're loud, but there is a huge percentage of the population that just does not care. And they have this sort of fake sense of safety because of American exceptionalism. They see war as something that happens only overseas and abroad, where they are never going to be in danger of a missile strike, where they are never going to be worried about being blown up. And I am here to show you with factual evidence to back me up that that cannot be the thought process anymore. Here's what we know. Over the weekend, Donald Trump decided to hold hands with Netanyahu, and they decided collectively, as two old men who were trying to avoid prison time, that they were going to go ahead and strike Iran. As a result, we now have missiles flying back and forth between Israel and Iran and a whole bunch of other countries, and it doesn't look like this is stopping anytime soon. However, what's not being reported widely, this is from MS Now, and there are other articles that you can cross-check it with, I'm hoping it becomes a bigger story, is that Kash Patel earlier in the week, prior to these strikes in Iran, let go about a dozen or so FBI agents, critical FBI agents who have expertise in espionage and Iran. And of course, the reason why Kash Patel decided to fire them is complete bogusness and baloney, because they were involved in the documents investigation of Donald Trump. You know, when he took a whole bunch of boxes of paper documents and then tried to flush them down the toilets at Mar-a-Lago? Yeah, that was what they were investigating. In letting all of these people go, he gutted the global espionage unit known as CI-12. But what does CI-12 do? CI-12 conducts investigations of illegal media leaks and mishandling of classified documents, but also has veteran agents trained on threats and spy operations with a special focus on the Middle East, including Iran and its proxies. Yeah, you're putting the pieces of the puzzle together correctly. Donald Trump decided with Netanyahu to strike Iran, and previously, just days before, Kash Patel of the FBI decided to get rid of all of the people who are experts in espionage, which is spying, and Iran. They had all kinds of cases likely going on who might be spies for Iran, any sort of stirrings of some sort of groups that might be within the United States that wish us harm, etc. But of course, that's not all. The acting director of CISA, which stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, was let go. Why, you might ask? Because he was taking classified information and feeding it to ChatGPT on a public version of that AI platform. Sorry, I don't have the technical lingo to explain. Essentially, he was taking private things and making them public. And don't get me wrong, losing him is not a loss, because he had no prior experience in federal government before Noam appointed him last May as the deputy director of CISA. You're reading that right. He worked in the private IT sector. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, there are 6 staffers plus a 7th who was fired because they arranged for this now former director of CISA to take a polygraph test because there were issues with him. And when I say you should open that can of worms, I mean you're going down a rabbit hole. It wasn't just about the ChatGPT thing. So how do we clean up this mess? Apparently we don't right now, because CISA has been without a Senate-confirmed leader since the start of Trump's second term, when former director Jen Esterly stepped down. It's unclear whether Planky, which is the one that I guess Trump wants to confirm, will be confirmed anytime soon, as Senate Republicans have been blocking his nomination over unrelated partisan grievances for months. Why is this a problem for the American people? Because the entire purpose of the CISA is to work to defend against cyber threats and attacks, and is also responsible for building resilient infrastructure so that if we are attacked, we can come back from it quickly. So here we are. We have understaffing in CI-12, which is to protect us from any knowledge, any information, any intelligence coming out of Iran and any spies that may be overseas or within the United States. And we are understaffed at the CISA with no clear leadership, and they are responsible for making sure that we do not experience any sort of cyber attack, and if we do, we're able to come back from it.
And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and welcome back to the show. So as I said, things are just moving really fast, and there is such a tremendous amount of information that it's going to be difficult to keep on top of it all, but I'm going to do my best. Usually I do upstream commentary and analysis, and we're going to be doing that, but we are of necessity limited as to the scope of what we can do because we only have 2 shows. We're only a weekend show, and as a consequence, we're not going to get to everything. And as I've said before, things are moving apace. And when I say apace, I mean that they are moving with all due speed. And there are reasons for that. One of the overarching reasons is because Donald Trump is a very simple character. He's compared to the people who are behind him, who in my opinion are actually much more dangerous, because it has always been my statement that Donald Trump is being used by them. He's a simple man. He believes in deals. He believes in the color gold. He believes in actual gold. He believes in crypto. He believes in things like that. He doesn't believe in government. Government is just a platform by which he can continue his grift and his con. The people behind him are ideologues and technicians like Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is one of those, and they are much more dangerous. Donald Trump can be easily be used, and typically such persons are easily used. So, okay, we've just heard this comment, this somewhat long clip, and I don't apologize for doing it because it's useful. It's useful to get my colleagues in the alternative digital media talking about these things because they provide information that you're not really hearing in what I typically call the corrupt, controlled corporate media, who has failed in its mission. So it's the failed, corrupt, controlled corporate media. So at this point, I would just like to make a couple of comments here, if I may. Note, please, that in the clip that you just heard, you're being told truths. Or in the alternative, if you want to say, Jake, how can you make this sweeping statement and say we're being told truths? Okay, you are being told, and I allege, because I'm the one who's giving it to you, and I take responsibility for that, you are being told truths, or alternatively, you're being told substantive and not irresponsible allegations coming from a responsible source that you can check. It's total hypocrisy. That's the name. Look that up and you'll find that. That in a court would be considered what is called in law an evidentiary proffer. Proffer. And in court, when a judge comes to you and says, Counselor, do you have any sort of a proffer to make right now as to what is it that you're going to show? He's doing that because he wants to know whether the case is nonsense or not, or whether the case can go forward, because you as an attorney, and actually as a litigant, even as a litigant, Rule 11, which is the rule that applies in most of these cases, either in state court or in federal court, states that when you sign a pleading, you're making an affirmative statement that it is true and correct to the best of your personal knowledge and belief, and it's not interposed for any other reason, like to delay, hinder, increase the cost of litigation, avoid a just indebtedness, so just whatever it is, and that's important. That's really important, because when you're an attorney, and this doesn't actually happen to attorneys, and there's another reason for that, which I'm not going to go into right now, but it's interesting. But Rule 11 is very serious. And if you run afoul of Rule 11, you can have sanctions imposed upon you, and you can have your case dismissed summarily. So when a judge says that, that's, really important. And I want you to know that I know that, and that I take it seriously, having spent 30 years in the legal profession, that you don't make irresponsible allegations. And I don't make irresponsible allegations to my listeners and my viewers, if you're watching the video version of this. And I want you to know that going forward. So this particular clip you're hearing 2 things. First, amazingly, the people in charge of an incredibly sensitive and important part of our intelligence community, they were all fired. Not just one of them were fired, not two or three, but they were all fired. And who were these people? Well, they were FBI agents, and they were under the direct supervisory authority of Kash Patel. And they had particular knowledge and experience in espionage, counter espionage, and the situation with Iran, and, obviously, relative to espionage and counter espionage, this would be extremely important with regard to Iran. Because why do you think? I mean, look, I have respect for the Iranians as a people. I think that they're under an unbelievably oppressive regime that kills its own people, but the Iranians are smart. If they know that the United States has been taking out their officials, including Grand Ayatollah Khamenei, who's the most recent one, and they killed the president of Iran, I think, in 2024. I don't know if it was 2024, but they killed him. So they've been taking out Iranian officials. What do you think the remaining leaders in Iran want to do? I'll bet they would like to return the favor tit for tat with the United States of America. And Trump has just gotten rid of, or Kash Patel, and Patel acted at the direction of either someone above him, which in my opinion would be someone like Stephen Miller, but Trump himself. So why were these people fired? Because this is extraordinarily dangerous. And one of the things that I think is that Donald Trump doesn't think about these things, just like Pete Hegseth doesn't think about the fact that he gathered 800 flag rank officers all together in one place where they could all be taken out. Just an incredibly irresponsible act. And we'll have more to say about that too. May not get to it in this show, but we'll have more to say about it. Okay, so why were they fired? They were fired because when Trump was out of power, they were a part of an investigation into him, purloining government documents, which he definitely did, and among other things, hiding them in such unsavory and thoughtless and puerile and pedestrian locations as underground bathrooms at Mar-a-Lago, and attempting, moreover, through his personal assistants, to rip them up and flush them down the toilet. Elegant, huh? That's the way to get rid of documents. Just rip them up and flush them down the toilet. But see, this is what happened. Uh, Patel, undoubtedly under the direction of Trump, undoubtedly, whether through some intermediary like Stephen Miller, as I say, or whether he got the information from Trump himself, gutted a global espionage unit in the FBI known as CI-12. And again, what does CI-12 do? CI-12 conducts investigations of illegal media leaks, of mishandling of classified documents, but also has veteran agents trained on threats and spy operations with a special focus on the Middle East, including Iran and its proxies. Are you getting this? So, in other words, let's put the pieces together here. Donald Trump decided with Netanyahu to strike Iran. And previously, I'm getting ahead of myself. Previously, just days before, Kash Patel of the FBI decided to get rid of all the people in the FBI who are experts in espionage, in spying, and Iran. And they had all kinds of cases that likely were going on with people who might be spies for Iran. Any sort of stirrings of some groups that might be within the United States that wish us harm, etc. Okay, so what's the next thing that happened? Well, the acting director of CISA, and CISA stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that person was let go. And you might ask, well, why was that person let go? Because he was taking classified information and feeding it to ChatGPT on a public version of that AI platform. Essentially, He was taking private things and making them public. And don't get me wrong, losing him is not a loss because he had no prior experience in federal government before Kristi Noem, who now I hear is in trouble and may be about to be dismissed by Trump, appointed him last May as deputy director of CISA. In other words, he worked in the private IT sector. There are also 6 staffers, plus a 7th, who was fired because they arranged for this now former director of CISA to take a polygraph test because there were issues with him. And when I say you should open that can of worms, I mean you're going down a rabbit hole. It just wasn't about the Chat GPT thing. So why is this a problem for the American people? Well, the entire purpose of CISA is to work to defend against cyber threats and attacks, and is also responsible for building resilient infrastructure so that if we are attacked, we can come back from it quickly. So we now have an understaffing in CI-12, which is to protect us from any knowledge, any information, any intelligence coming out of Iran, and any spies that may be overseas or within the United States. We are understaffed at CISA. There is no leadership anymore, and they are responsible for making sure that we do not experience any sort of cyber attack, and if we do, we're able to come back from it. And at this point, let's take another break. This is Politics by Jake, and we will be right back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Now, one of the things that I talk about on the show is that there are levels of truth, and you're not necessarily being told the level of truth that the government wants you to know about what is going on and why what is happening is happening. The actual reason why something is happening may be different from what you're being told. And we have about, I think it's 27. I'm going to check that out. And once again, we may not get to that on this show, but we will on the Sunday show. 27 different reasons have been given already as far as why we attacked Iran. And, you know, this is obviously not good messaging. It honestly indicates that the government is scrambling, that I think maybe they didn't expect, because they're locked in their own little bubble. You've heard me talk about that phenomenon known as Beltway fever, when you get inside that beltway that encircles Washington, D.C., that people just, they lose their minds, basically, is what happens. Now, what it is likely that you have been told is that we attacked Iran because Iran was going to bomb Israel, and we couldn't allow that to happen. And I've got an interesting clip that I'll try to get to from ex-President Nixon, who explained what the unique situation is with Iran or Iran. I tend to say Iran. I think the correct pronunciation is Iran, but in this particular case, it's a question of potato, and I am just going to kind of default to Iran because that's the one that I'm most familiar with, and I think everybody understands what it is that I'm saying. So, as I said, we think that the motive, or we're being told that the motive, and again, 27 different things, okay? The motive behind going after Iran was the missiles. Here's something to consider. If you go back to 9/11, when we were attacked, and this is a whole entire other thing, It's by the boards now. It's in the annals of history. It's not worthwhile to really dwell on it anymore, just like dwelling on an old relationship where you got done wrong. The thing is to do is after a time, you just need to move on. So after 9/11, Wesley Clark said this. He said, "We're going to invade 7 countries in 5 years." And what they were talking about, and this is important, were countries where those central banks that exist were not on board to do programmable money. And their governance structures were not on board with essentially, because of Epstein, I'll call it the Rockefeller Rothschilds model. And there was an effort to say, okay, we're basically going to assert control of the central banks in those countries. And this is an interesting theory. And I think, and some people will say, oh, well, central banks don't control this. Well, you know what? One of the things that we've seen in this government, and it's been eye opening, and it's been dismaying, and it's been discouraging and disappointing in a way because people are going along with Trump, for example, and I understand that a lot of people hate him in Congress because they're afraid of their power, their prestige, their entitlement, their paychecks, and their insider trading information that they get in order to go from something like in the hundreds of thousands when they entered Congress to in the millions just 2 or 3 or 4 years after. And how did that happen? So you have this, and they're afraid of that, and they're not going to jeopardize that. And that's disappointing because that's not government in service, or their government service is being compromised so that they can enrich themselves. And that's unfortunate. But we could speculate, and I think it's worthwhile, based on what I just stated, that it's basically a lie to say that money doesn't enter into this and that banking institutions and central banks, and we're not in favor of central banks, we're not in favor of the Federal Reserve. Why? Because it's a central bank, it's not a national bank. And to say anything else is just putting lipstick on a pig. And I think we've done a show on the Federal Reserve. We may need to do more about that. And I am not wedded in any sense to what people call conspiracy theories, but I do know facts. And I do understand these things, which is why I'm on this show and talking to you now. Somebody knew that I understand these things and had confidence in me that I could convey them to the KCAA and indeed the podcasting public on YouTube and Instagram and so on and so forth. So I don't fear and I don't withhold and I don't blanch to make these kind of statements and bring them to your attention because this is upstream analysis. This is upstream commentary. So, okay. One of the reasons you could conjecture, and I think it would be a good conjecture, I don't think it would be idle and unsupported and unstructured. One of the reasons you could say is we're seeing so much tension around Iran right now is because Iran is the big leakage in the system. So you might say, well, all right, hold on a minute. I thought it was because Iran was going to bomb Israel. So it's not about their nukes? Well, so far as we know, they don't have nukes because we've been sanctioning them and proscribing them so that that doesn't happen. But I would say consider the levels of truth. Consider Iran's central bank. And maybe that counts. And maybe one of the reasons it counts is because their oil and their energy is very important, including for who? Well, including for China. And that's very important in the system that has come to be known by the acronym BRIC, BRIC. Okay, so what the heck is this that Jake is talking about? The BRICS? Let's explain this, all right? The BRICS. Originally, it was BRIC, BRIC. Brazil, Russia, India, China. But this was later joined by South Africa, and actually, more recently, expansion has included Iran and Saudi Arabia, who has been invited and engaged in alignment discussions. Now, if a globally interoperable, centrally programmable financial system is an endgame here, as I'm suggesting might be, I'm bringing it to your attention, then uncontrolled settlement channels like BRICS aligned energy trade outside the dollar rails, and we just talked about this on the last show, didn't we? Who knew we were going to talk about it again so soon? This would represent leakage. This would represent an attempt to replace the dollar. Remember how we talked about that? Replacing the Federal Reserve System and the dollar as the reserve currency? This would represent leakage, and that would have to be contained. It would be crucial, and it would be highly in the interests of the United States as well as a central banking system in order to facilitate this and make this happen and to bring the BRICS into line. The BRICS have absolutely discussed alternative settlement currencies. We just talked about this last week. Local currency trade agreements, a potential BRICS payment system, reduced reliance on SWIFT. And why is that? You want to apply something that's really going to get these outliers' attention. Cut them off from the SWIFT system, like what Biden did to Russia. Just cut them off for a day. See what that does to them. And this had a profound effect. I mean, China already runs CIPAS. Russia built alternatives after sanctions because this is intolerable. It's intolerable, and Iran operates under sanction pressure and has to use workarounds. So they are all about being motivated to find an alternative to living under this system. And if energy trade between Iran and China increasingly bypasses dollar clearing, that weakens enforcement leverage. And that is absolutely factual. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. Welcome to the show. Let's slow this down, what we've been talking about. We've had 27 explanations in just a few days for why Iran had to be struck. 27. Nuclear timing, deterrence, regional stability, defensive allies, credibility doctrine, preemption, I'm just going through them all here, intelligence indicators, retaliation logic, strategic necessity, humanitarian posture, you name it. Now, in a courtroom, when the theory, and I have some expertise in this, having been in the legal profession for 30 years, in a courtroom, when the theory of the case keeps shifting, what does that tell you? It tells you that the advocate doesn't like his case. He doesn't think it's strong. He doesn't want to anchor a single narrative because it's not strong. And when a judge looks at that, the judge will say at a certain point, counselor, give me your proffer. What is the real theory here? And that's because as an attorney, and even as an in pro per or pro se litigant, depends on what state you're in, what that leads. It just means in pro per means on your own behalf. Pro se means for yourself. It's the same thing. Different states, different Latin proverbs. So when you do that, there's something called Rule 11. And in Rule 11, you're supposed to, everything that you say with regard to the case, you're not supposed to waste the court's time. You're supposed to offer real actionable things and not a bunch of nonsense. And if you can't do it, you're in violation of Rule 11 because the Rule 11 says that every allegation, it has to be considered, it has to relate to the case, and it has to be not interposed for some other reason, like to delay or to obfuscate. So I now go back to some of the 27 explanations in just a few days for Iran had to be struck. Nuclear timing, deterrence, regional stability, defense of allies, credibility doctrine. Are you beginning to get the idea here? This is not working. Someone is confused, or someone doesn't want to say the real reason why the case, and a judge wouldn't accept that. A judge wouldn't accept that at all. A judge wouldn't appreciate that. This is what I'm doing here. I'm not accusing. I'm not asserting hidden cabals, even though there are hidden cabals. I'm asking what incentive structure would unify these explanations, because when the surface explanations multiply, the structural explanation often simplifies. Okay? So let's take a look at this, shall we? Let's talk about, say, like dollar discipline. That's an important one. We've just been talking about that on the show. Last week we had a show on that. So let's begin with what we know. The global system is dollar anchored, right? The dollar is the reserve currency. Why is it the reserve currency? Because nothing can absorb 1 to 2 trillion on a normal day and up to $5 or $6 trillion. And what this is, when I say 1 to 2 trillion a day, or I say 5 to 6 trillion a day, people want their money in dollars. They don't want treasury bonds or something else like that. Every government, and this is, governments, often governments that do this, comes a time where they want their money. They just want their money. Whole popular movies have been summed up with the recurring phrase, I want my money. I just want my money. This is the way the world works. People just want their money. So when people want their money, there has to be a system that can provide that, and that can provide that right away. And the dollar, backed by the Federal Reserve, is the only system there is. And we talked last week on the show about other systems, and they're just, it's a pipe dream. It's just something that's not going to happen. So the global system, so that, having explained that, the global system is dollar anchored. Oil trades predominantly in dollars. This has all been this way for a long time. Sanctions operate through dollar clearing. International settlements often pass through U.S. influenced rails. That's not opinion. That's not Jake saying that's what I think it is. No. That's world monetary system plumbing. And now we enter the BRICS that we've talked about. The BRICS have recently been openly discussing local currency trade, reduced dependence on SWIFT, because SWIFT can take you right out of the system. And actually, I'm not saying that right. SWIFT is the system for fast payments. And if you are excluded from SWIFT, like Russia has been, as a part of sanctions, it just screws everything up. So the BRICS nations are looking at this and they're saying, we have to do something else. Alternative settlement mechanisms go along with this. SWIFT is obviously a settlement mechanism, a potential BRICS currency framework. Now, I don't care if you think that that's premature or fragmented. The intent matters. And then we add Iran to the alignment mix. What is Iran? Iran is, well, one of the things Iran is energy. Iran is energy. Energy is leverage. Much of that energy flows to China. And if China can secure oil in non-dollar settlement structures, sanction leverage weakens. If China is doing something that the United States doesn't like, and the United States can't take them out of the SWIFT system, which is, by the way, it's a devastating sanction. SWIFT is a devastating sanction. All right, and at this point, I better explain what SWIFT is. Because I just realized that maybe you know. SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT is the global messaging network that banks use to move money across borders. That's what it is, SWIFT. It doesn't actually hold or transfer the money itself. Instead, it sends the secure instructions between financial institutions telling them where the money should go. You probably use SWIFT every single day and you didn't even know it, but that's what you're using. Think of it like this, okay? The money moves through bank accounts. SWIFT carries the message that tells the banks what to do. And in practical terms, how this works out, like I say, you probably do this all the time. When someone wires money internationally, your bank creates a SWIFT message. That message travels through the SWIFT network. The receiving bank reads the message and credits the recipient's account. What makes SWIFT powerful, 11,000 plus financial institutions use it. It operates in 200 plus countries. It handles millions of messages daily. Once again, this is plumbing. This is an opinion. This is how the system works. It handles millions of messages daily involving trillions of dollars. Now, this is a weapon. This matters, and this is what the BRICS have been talking about. When countries are cut off from SWIFT, for example, parts of Russia after the Ukraine invasion, their banks struggle to conduct international trade because the messaging infrastructure is gone. Oil, wheat, machinery, everything becomes harder to pay for. No message, no payment. Imagine the global financial system as a vast orchestra. The banks are the musicians, money is the sound, SWIFT is the sheet music, and conductor signal telling everybody when and how to play. Without it, the music dissolves into chaos. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, thank you very much, Twain Consulting, and we are back. So I felt that I needed to explain that before moving on. So, thus having done, let's get back to what it is we were talking about. So we were basically talking about how the BRICS nations want to see if they can resolve things, because SWIFT is a powerful, powerful weapon. It will completely screw up a country's trade balance. They won't be able to pay anybody, or at least not very easily, or they'll have to do it in very awkward and not quick ways. The SWIFT system is incredibly quick. The SWIFT system is, for all intents and purposes, instantaneous. This power of this cannot be doubted or minimized. So Iran is energy. And who are we attacking right now? We're attacking Iran. Iran is energy. Energy is leverage. Much of that energy flows to China. You know, mainland China, the communists, the Chi-Coms. Yeah, that's who it is. Xi, the Emperor Xi. Talked about him. Okay, enough of that. If China can secure oil in non-dollar settlement structures, it would really like to do that, regardless of how it may kowtow to the United States' power of the dollar as the reserve currency. If it can do that, this is what happens. The sanction leverage that the United States has over China, over any nation, it weakens, because they can say, oh, we can do our settlement structures differently. We don't have to use the dollar, so dollar gravity weakens. Enforcement weakens. Sanction leverage weakens. Now, ask yourself, okay, would a dollar dominant system prefer fragmentation inside BRICS or consolidation? Would it prefer alternative settlement rails? In other words, would it prefer Iran or China or South Africa saying, let's use some other way to settle things? Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. So, would a dollar dominant system want that? No. No, 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 no. A dollar dominant system wouldn't want that. So, this is simple, isn't it? You have to defend if you're a non-BRIC nation and you believe in the dollar as the reserve currency, you have to defend settlement dominance. You have to. That alone is a sufficient geopolitical incentive. And we're talking about why Iran was attacked. Iran is an outlier. So you don't need anything exotic to understand this. And the beauty of it is that it's not 27 different explanations, okay? All right. So we talked about level B, level A, that's dollar dominance. Now let's talk about level B, architecture preservation. So let's widen the lens, okay? Across major economies, we are seeing research into central bank digital currencies, CBDCs they're called, central bank digital currency, CBDC, programmable settlement tools, cross-border digital payment interoperability, compliance integration frameworks. And what are all these things? These are all elements of the SWIFT network. And you're seeing research into that. And I'm not saying a global control grid is about to drop from the sky. I am saying that monetary architecture is evolving, and yes, crypto is part of that. And evolving architecture has a problem. That's leakage. And if large energy producers operate outside your settlement perimeter, like the BRICS, like China, like Iran, like South Africa, like the rest of them, if parallel rails, you understand, parallel rails for settlement, so in other words, one rail would be the dollar and another rail would be the yuan or the renminbi or just, whatever it is. If parallel rails gain traction, if cross-border energy trades move into independent clearing systems, your ability to shape future architecture diminishes. You cannot build an interoperable system if large sovereign blocs like Iran, like China, which is just an enormously large bloc, are constructing alternative pipes. And yes, Russia is one of those. So level A is defending the dollar, okay? Could also serve level B, which is preserving architectural influence over what comes next. That's not a secret plan. That's really easy to understand. That is incentive alignment. All right, moving on. Now, why is the narrative... So 27 different things. Who knows? By the time you hear the show, it could be more. Why is this happening? Why is the narrative so fragmented? Now, here's where it gets interesting, okay? If this were purely nuclear urgency, we'd get nuclear urgency messaging. If this was purely retaliation, we'd get retaliation messaging. If this were purely humanitarian, we'd get humanitarian messaging. Instead, what are we getting? A buffet. It's like going to Circus or one of the Las Vegas strip places. 27 items, 54 items, just, whatever it is. And when you get a buffet of explanations, it often means, not always, but often, it means that the public-facing rationale is not the structural rationale. In World War II, Frank Capra and some other directors were hired by the government to produce such a unified story of why the American soldiers were fighting in World War II so that they could understand. And it was called Why We Fight. And it was one narrative, one enemy, one justification. And today, we get rotating justifications. That tells you something about internal clarity. Either there isn't internal clarity, and yes, I'm talking about the Trump fascist cabal, nay administration, nay regime, People don't like it when I talk about a regime because it's banana republic. It's like illegitimate. This is illegitimate. This is a kakistocracy. This is Kristi Noem, who is incompetent to begin with and abusive, being fired and being replaced by someone whose name is not Mark Mullins. It's not Wayne Mullins, but he was named Mark Wayne Mullins. This is a kakistocracy. Government by the worst people. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Those of you who want, you think I'm speaking pejorative, but I'm sorry. Okay, so let's layer this over something else. Finish this up. The forever war. Let's call this one the forever war collision. We've heard the phrase forever wars, right? We've heard promises to end them. We've heard criticisms of interventionism, and yet here we are. And when did we first hear it? Wesley Clark, right after 9/11, with 9/11. Oh, 2001, 2002. We're going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. That's neocons. Those are the neocons. These are the forever wars. And they've been going on ever since then. So we've heard the criticisms of interventionism, and yet here we are again. Escalation, positioning, regional destabilization. And if this were short term, you would see containment language. Instead, what you see is positioning language. Positioning is long term. And if this intersects with monetary leverage and energy alignment, then this is not a temporary flare up. You see? It's structural maintenance. All right, now let's talk about the Iran China factor. Let's be concrete. China needs energy, Iran supplies energy. Sanctions attempt to restrict that flow. Alternative settlement rails attempt to bypass that restriction. Now imagine you are defending dollar leverage. I know I am. You cannot allow large scale oil flows to normalize outside your enforcement umbrella. You can't. Because once normalized, others follow. Saudi alignment discussions, Russian energy settlement, bilateral trade agreements, it compounds. So, from a power geometry perspective, Iran is not just regional, Iran is structural. Now, what does this mean for you guys listening to me this Saturday afternoon? Let me speak plainly. If this analysis holds even partially, then what you're being told publicly is surface narrative. You're not being told the truth. And surface narrative mobilizes consent when the regime feels like it needs it. Structural narrative explains power to people who don't think, who are credulous, who are easily led. And if monetary enforcement is part of this equation, you will not hear it framed that way in official statements. What will you hear? You'll hear security language. You will hear deterrence language. You will hear stability language. But architecture language? Nope. You won't hear that stuff. That's upstream. So this isn't something that I can resolve just in one episode of the show. Over the next episodes, I think I would want to examine the BRICS cohesion versus fragmentation, the actual CBDC development versus speculation, whether energy settlement is materially shifting. These are all things. Whether intervention patterns correlate with settlement discipline, because if they do, this becomes a pattern. So I'm not telling you, in conclusion, this is the hidden truth. Although actually, yeah, I kind of am. What I am telling you is something that you can understand from a positive and non-pejorative way and say, this incentive map that I've just laid out to you, it deserves the scrutiny and the awareness of a responsible citizenry under the Constitution of the United States. Because when explanations multiply, when energy, currency, and enforcement intersect, you're not looking at randomness. You're looking at structure. And structure does not resolve in a news cycle. It unfolds. And we're going to keep unfolding it. And this is Politics by Jake. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire. Only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA.